do that.
All right, today in the shop, we're at the place where we need some heavy duty casters. We need casters that are gonna be able to handle above 1,500 pounds each. And on the market right now, a 1,500 pound caster could cost you $60 a piece. I need 8 casters. We're gonna see if we can save a little money today by making our own heavy duty casters. As you can see on our recently modified clevises, on our scissor lift frame, we need to have some casters right here. We're gonna attempt to make our own heavy duty casters out of this 1" by 2" bearing and a 2 3/8 pipe. As we've previously discussed, this 2 3/8 pipe and other pipe do not have an exact 2" inside diameter. So there's a lot of play with our bearings. I think we found a good solution for this, and we're gonna try it out together. Now we have some pipe cut to the dimensions we want. This will fit in here. So what we're gonna try to do is take some sheet metal that I found around the shop, then we'll roll this up to fill in that gap. All right, we got our inside circumference. We got a piece cut to 6 5/8. We got a test piece coiled up. Let's see if this helps. It's got a pretty tight fit in there now. That looks like that's gonna fit pretty good. Let's go ahead and clean these pieces of metal up, and let's move on to making some bushings. I have a little bit of rust prevention going on. I didn't want to be super too much about it because there's going to be a little bit of welding going on with this, but as easy as this metal rusted, I just wanted a little bit of protection in there. Now that the paint is dry, let's get these put back together. Now we've got our homemade spacers we made on our table saw. We cut those equal distance. Now they're packed in there. I left the filler material a little bit longer so that I'd be able to go completely flush with this, because what I think I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and just weld this in place, because if this fails, I don't need to dig these bearings back out to regain a piece of pipe. I'll just cut a new one at that time. So I'll just weld this up to be one contained unit and replace the whole thing as necessary. One thing I don't want to do is overheat this bearing and boil this grease inside here. So I'm going to do real small tacks and keep the heat as low as I can. To make sure this bearing stays centered as I tack it in, I have an old cheap socket that's 1". So I'll just put that in there like that, and that'll hold the alignment of my bearing so that it doesn't get off. We should be ready to tack this up. Let's see how this works. All right, so let's take a look at this. This isn't the cleanest. I'm trying to figure out how much heat to put on here and going small at first. So it's not too beautiful at first, but I think it will work. We'll clean these tacks up with a grinder. It doesn't look like I've burnt the dust cap, so like I said, we want to go with less than more right now. Burning the bearing is not an option. Let's flip this over and do the other side. This one came out the best. I think the hardest part was making sure I had good grounding for the arc. I ground off all the spikes off the outside that this left. That way if any hairs or cloth or anything got caught, it wouldn't just wind in there so easy. But obviously we have to leave the weld here and not grind it down too flush, because otherwise there won't be anything strong enough to hold it in. I did 8 tacks. I think this is going to be sufficient because we're really focusing on downward force on this, and these aren't going to be rotating a bunch. They're going to roll on a track. for the purpose of something in your shop that's just going to roll on the concrete, you know, most times going to sit still like a bench or something, I think this is going to work really good. Now, obviously, if this was going to be high speed or putting lots of miles on this thing, we'd maybe have to do something different. That would be up to the circumstance and what the need was. But yeah, that's about a $9 bearing, and this should be good up to like 2,000 to 3,000 pounds. So we'll see. What do you think? What's the rating going to be on this? Okay, so we got these all primered up. I'm not going to worry about the outside because it's just going to get ground off by rolling on the rail. All right, so now we're on to part 2 of this bearing build. Just like I needed to make my own heavy-duty casters, I also needed to make a heavy-duty pivot for my X-frame. So this is the big project we're working on, is this X-frame as an elevator floor for my pit that I made. If y'all want to go back and check out the current progress of this, all those videos are up there. Now I'm going to do this just exactly like I did the casters. This is going to hold 2 of these X-frame beams together. So this will represent the inside, the mating side of the 2 beams. We want to have this bearing as close as we can to the outside because we want to make sure that this bolt is in a shear position and not a bending position. We want to put all the strength into that. For this to fail, it'd have to shear, not bend. The main difference on this one is I'm only going to weld up the inside ring for this. And yeah, if I need to make a repair here, I'm going to be using a grinder to cut this out. But I've thought about several different things, and I'm going to end up adding too much thickness to this inside if I do anything besides just weld it in place. So to keep that close tolerance, we're going to weld it. Now on this one, I think I want to put more than the tacks that I did. I may try to get a solid fillet across here, but the trick to that is I'm going to have to do it one at a time and let them cool in between. Just like before, I have this to keep my bearing alignment straight and a bearing in the bottom. I'm going to work on several of these at one time so that I can allow the cooling process to happen on one as I move to the next. So here's what I got so far. All my bearings are still spinning smoothly. No plastic is melted. Yeah, I know, these are not pretty welds. What you do not want to do when you're welding, if you want something to look pretty, is to start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. Unfortunately, we have to use super low amperage. I'll take the grinder to it and take all the humps off so that we can get this back to as flush as we can. And hopefully we can have just a small washer in between the 2 beams to keep them separated and moving. Okay, I couldn't help it. I had to fill it in a little bit more. It just felt wrong leaving it like that. So here's kind of the final. Still not great, but a little less pits for things to get into. And then I'm going to seal it up with some primer so no corrosion starts in any of those pits. Okay, before we're ready to install these new wheels, first we need to gusset the ends of our beams. These tips were starting to flare apart, so we need something to kind of make this more rigid. There wasn't enough material left here to keep this strong, so we're going to weld a seam here, and then we'll be able to put our new casters there. All right, so I have all the gussets installed, got things kind of squared up. Let's install our first bearing. So I made some additional PVC bushings out of PVC water pipe, and they'll go to space this to keep it square in there. Now we have these big nuts to go on here to clamp it down. Here we are, there's our heavy duty caster. Let's get the rest of these installed. I'm going to wrap this video up. Let me know what you think about these casters. Will they work or will they not? But the only way to know for sure if they're going to work is if you hit subscribe right now and check back later on. Hit me in the comments as this goes on and I'll answer truthfully what's going on. Definitely having to do this over and over and over and over and over was a lot of tedious work for me. It took a lot of time to get this out. Maybe it'd be worth a couple of $100 extra to buy all the casters to the right size. What I was also finding is finding the right dimensions to the specific application. Since I'm making something custom, I wasn't really finding what I needed. I did save hundreds of dollars, but this did take me like 3 days to get done. Our next video is going to be standing this frame up. Now that we have this ready to go, we can get our final measurements of our final spacing. And if you've missed any of this in the past, we got a full playlist of digging this pit, putting concrete in, and then all the details of this build have been laid out already. So there's always something going at Think Build Test. We're glad you watched this video. We'll see you on the next one. Catch you later.
Today is the day I'm making a change, building things